In this video, you're going to hear from well-respected police chief Scott Hughes, and he's going to give his advice to rookies about the type of training they should seek out, how to manage the stress on the job, and he shares his perspective about social media. This is all very important. Here's my interview with Chief Hughes. What are the most important qualities and skills that rookie officers should focus on developing in their first few years on the job, in your opinion?
For me, advice I would give to rookies is as boring as it sounds, please understand the importance of knowing case law. Understand the legal side of the house. A lot of police officers, especially young cops, and listen, I'm that person too. They want to go to tactical classes, right? They want to do all the tactics and all the fun stuff. When you look at what you're going to spend your time doing, you're going to be better time spent learning the legal side of the house, learning when you can get somebody out of the car, when you can search them, when you can pat them down. Can you cross the threshold? Can you ask for ID? Do I have to Miranda? If I can keep you legally confident, then your tactics are gonna naturally follow. So take as much legal training as you can.
Yeah, good advice.
I think many officers, for many reasons, are only given the bare minimum training that might be required by their state post or their state, whoever oversees that side of the house. So no fault to the officers because they're getting what the agency's giving me. What I have seen is some of that training that's pushed out from the state level. It's very dry. It's very boring. It's what some would just call death by PowerPoint. So the officers aren't really understanding it. They're not grasping it. And that's a problem because the second part of this is they're going to be thrusted into a situation where they're going to start to experience this sudden onset of acute stress, right? That's going to overcome them. They're going to be in this critical instant, and they're not going to have that knowledge base of what they can and can't do. And in some situations, then that's going to cause them to perhaps go over the top. We often say in our trainings that uses of excessive force aren't caused on purpose, if you will. It's caused because a lot of times the officers can't handle the stress at that moment, and they can't handle the stress at the moment because they haven't been properly trained to deal with that stress. If all you're doing is sitting in front of a computer listening to a webinar or sitting in a class that's a death by PowerPoint, that's not mimicking the realities that you're going to face out here on the street.
I'm glad you brought up the death by PowerPoint. I got flashbacks to someone who taught the first few years I was a police officer, and every year this person would literally just read the case law word for word. It was horrible. And I walked out of there just more relieved it was done rather than, feeling fulfilled that I had learned more. And I
Yeah.
think for me personally, I was just very grateful that I worked in a busy district where we consistently had to remember the
Mhm.
Fourth Amendment and stuff like that. We had to remember it or else, yeah, I mean, cases get dismissed in court, lawsuits, stuff like that. But it's like most other things in the job, it's a perishable skill. But we were consistently doing it, being in a busy district, and it was a benefit. But that
Yeah.
death by PowerPoint, it's got to go.
You could be a great police officer, but that doesn't mean you're going to be a great instructor.
Let's move on to the reality of the job where there is that exposure to critical incidents. There's stressors on the job. So what advice would you give to rookie officers, newer officers regarding how to handle it, cope with it in healthy ways? What advice would you give?
Yeah, well, I think the number one common answer is don't rely on alcohol, right, to get you through it. We've come a long way in changing that culture. It still exists. But we've come a long way in that aspect. One of the things that I'm proud of here at my agency, specific to this topic, I allow my officers to work out on duty 7 days a week. And
Outstanding.
we do have some restrictions built in, certain times a day and call volume and staffing numbers. But outside of that, every day they can come in for no less than 60 minutes and they can work out on duty. And I think that physical mental connection has been proven now repeatedly through you just Google the benefits of mental health. I think that's critical is you got to keep yourself physically in the right state of mind because mentally then you're going to be more prepared. We have a phenomenal program here where we have trauma counselors, as I'll call them, or psychologists, if you will, that at a minimum of twice a year they have to sit in a room and talk. Now, whether they talk or not, I have no idea because I'm obviously not in those rooms. Officers take advantage of that program. They take advantage of having that resource. And I would tell newer officers, you got to find that work-life balance. You have to take care of yourself. Don't rely on the alcohol. And then the last thing that we do here in our agency, we have a physical therapist who comes into the police department and he will stretch, he'll dry needle, he'll work out whatever's aching, whatever pain you have. I think that is all encompasses how you kind of stay focused, right? The other thing I'll tell you is because I think cops get into that social media and they start reading these comments and they start seeing things. And I think a lot of what's pushed out through social media is slanted against law enforcement, and that takes a toll on us. So I try to remind officers when I teach that never forget that more folks appreciate you than don't appreciate you.
What advice do you give to new officers to drown out the internal noise within the four walls of the department?
Dr. Kevin Gilmartin, I'm sure you've heard of him. He wrote a book
Oh, yeah.
called Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement. And I think it was him. I hope I don't mess this up and give him credit for something he didn't say, but I'm pretty sure he was the one that said there's enough stress outside of the four walls. We don't need to make more stress inside of the four walls. You spend more time with the men and women that you work with than you do with your own families. So every one of us should strive to want to create an atmosphere that is the best it can be. Focus on what you can control. I think too many cops worry about things they have no control over, and then that they just get caught up in this who got promoted, who got this assignment, who got that assignment, who's
Two.
you know,
It's
who
draining.
got who
Yeah.
got the new car? Why am I driving the old car? Why do we have these light bars? These patches are ugly. These badges are dumb. Don't get caught up into things you have no control over, because all that's going to do is that's going to take over you. And then you're going to start bringing that to work and you're going to start taking it home with you, and you're never going to change it. I'll also say this: if the environment that you work in is so toxic, then go, get out.
Yes.
You are in a great place right now in law enforcement, and that is you can leave tomorrow and somebody's going to hire you. But if it's that toxic and it's affecting your life, and you're like, hey, look, I'm not worrying about things I can't control. It's just that bad. Then get out. Because if you don't, you're either going to go further down the rabbit hole, or it's going to end up impacting your safety, because your mind's going to be somewhere else when you need to be focusing on that shoulder blade or that hand reaching for the waistband, and you're going to miss it, or you're going to take it home with you and you're going to find yourself sitting at a table with a divorce attorney or worse.
Social media,
Yeah.
it can be very distracting. What I'm seeing on Instagram in particular is a lot of police officers just making video after video of them dancing or doing whatever. It feels like I don't know I don't know their heart. I don't know them at work. I just see what I see on social media, but that makes an impression. So what do you tell some who maybe are losing focus and prioritizing likes over going out there and stopping crime or preventing crime or interacting with people and making an impact that way?
If the organization is asking him or her to do that, that's its own separate kind of issue, right? I mean, if the department says, hey, we want you to do this dancing thing, that's probably more on the department, right? The individual side, again, back in the day, old guy talking, we were always told, don't do anything that you don't want to see on the 6 o'clock news. I'm probably more of a traditionalist. I wholeheartedly agree that appearance commands respect. I think if you look good, you feel better about yourself, you do a better job. I think a lot of this job too comes down to balance. Officers got to find that balance. I'm okay with humanizing the badge and kind of putting yourself out there to show that you're human, but we also are professionals.
Yes.
And you have to figure out what that balance is. I mean, there's been some of these videos that have come out. You've got officers been disciplined, you've got some been terminated. You're going to see some of these come up in trials to try to prove, again, I'm putting prove in quotes, what type of a person you are. I got another one that I'm familiar with where, he's out, pictures of him drinking and doing, stuff that, again, not illegal, but is that what you want to, kind of what you want to represent? So